Welcome to Building Birmingham Together, a show about Birmingham's business leaders' successes, failures, and lessons learned to encourage you to remember that dreaming is free, but the hustle is sold separately. I'm your host, Kim Lee, founder and CEO of Forge. Building Birmingham Together is brought to you today by Forge. Forge is Birmingham's first professional co-working space located in the heart of downtown Birmingham at the Pizitz building. With private offices, open workspace, as well as meeting and event space, Forge is the place where small business owners, entrepreneurs, and remote workers come together, meet new people, and get work done. If you would like to find out more about Forge, you can visit workatforge.com and schedule a tour directly on our website. Today on Building Birmingham Together, I have Dr. Patrick J. Murphy. Dr. Murphy is a professor at the University of Alabama, known as UAB. He is the Goodrich Entrepreneurship Chair and Professor and Director of Entrepreneurship. Dr. Murphy has 20 years of experience worldwide in entrepreneurial ventures, angel investing, and advising. And if that does not keep him busy enough, he is also a published author in the Yale University Press, Harvard Business Review, and many other international journals. Dr. Murphy was brought to UAB to start the entrepreneurship program, which launched last semester, August 2020, during COVID, which should not go unnoticed. The program is already garnering national attention, and after just one semester, already has 50 kids enrolled in the program. So it has been very exciting to watch it grow on the outside, to watch the program grow on the outside. So I'm excited to have you, Patrick, here today to tell us about that and also about you and your journey of getting to this point in your career. So thank you for being here today.
You're very welcome, and thank you for inviting me. I'm excited and thrilled to be here with you.
Yeah, so we record these interviews via Zoom, and we do post the video on YouTube. But for those of you just listening, Patrick is sitting at UAB outside with UAB behind him, enjoying the beautiful day. So it's fun to see you actually on campus telling us about what's going on.
That's right. And, you know, I moved here from the city of Chicago, and I'll never take this weather for granted down here in Birmingham, Alabama. I can tell you that.
Yeah, especially in March 8th, to be able to sit outside. It's pretty awesome. So will you just tell us a little bit? I know this is a loaded question because you have done so many things in your career, but just tell us a little bit about yourself. And we will get to later on about what brought you to Birmingham, but just a short snippet of your history and what you're doing.
Sure. So I grew up in Washington State and went to a number of different high schools because my family moved around quite a bit. And I think growing up that the moves turned me into an observer of people and places. And that can turn you into one who observes and then reports or tells the story of what you saw in another place. And I believe that's what made me a researcher and a scholar. And it turned me into what I am today, moving around quite a bit growing up. But long story short, I went to school in, high school in Texas, Washington, Indiana. I went to undergrad in Iowa, graduate school in Ohio, graduate school in Illinois, moved to the city of Chicago in June of 2000. And at that point, I was wrapping up my PhD and I became a faculty member at DePaul University. And for me, it's always been, I'm going to do either, there's two tracks for me. I'm either going to be an entrepreneur or I'm going to be an academic, because for me, freedom is number one. I need freedom to follow whatever ideas or whatever curiosities are driving me. So that pulled me toward academia. I didn't start out wanting to be an academic. In fact, the only thing I ever wanted to be growing up was a truck driver, because there was something about hitting the road and getting out there and exploring that just appealed to my young self. But I've only ever just done what I love to do each and every day, and had the faith that I would end up where I should be. And so that's what brought me to this particular career track. And then of course, I got turned on to entrepreneurs and everything else along the way for a bunch of reasons that I'm sure we'll get into. But I didn't plan to be an academic. It more or less found me, as UAB did. I never thought I'd leave the city of Chicago. And then I was recruited to come here. And it's been a it's been a whirlwind. It has been a great ride so far, and I can't tell you how excited I am about what we're going to do over the years to come.
Oh, I can't wait to hear about that in a little bit. So I want to know, anybody who talks to you know how passionate you are about entrepreneurship. So can you tell us just a little bit more about that journey where I did not know that you thought you wanted to be a truck driver, but just the observer and taking in from everywhere you had been in your childhood to like truly passionate about entrepreneurship and giving that access to other people?
A lot of it came out of philosophy and history that I
Mhm.
read. I've always read a lot. I'm generally reading 4 or 5 books at any given time, and they're very obscure books. They're not popular books. But I had discovered a philosopher named Karl Popper, who was an epistemologist. He died in 1994, and I've read every word he's ever written, journal articles, every single thing out there. In fact, if you go to Wikipedia, there's a picture of his tombstone that I took in probably 2008 or so. I think it's still there. I haven't looked in a few years, but I made the pilgrimage to his gravesite. So I know him and a number of other philosophers very thoroughly. And when you talk about these big questions about the future and what your knowledge can actually do for you and how you can learn from failure, there's some incredibly powerful concepts and ways of thinking about these basic human questions that are out there. And so in my own personal journey in really getting serious about learning as much as I can about the limits of human knowledge, I stumbled upon these universal themes that entrepreneurs face. Thinking globally and acting locally,
Mhm.
dealing with uncertainty, forecasting the future, failing, working with others, trusting others, power, risk. All of these things have been observed by people who devoted their lives to doing them. And so what Popper did for me was give me a logic for understanding the conjectures and the refutations, as he would call it, or the trial and error that maybe you might think of in an innovative entrepreneurial context. And that all came to me when I was in graduate school, and I ended up um, working with a lot of entrepreneurs in the city of Chicago that I used in my dissertation. But I applied epistemological principles to how entrepreneurs discover opportunities. And that was my way. Like I said earlier, I was either going to be a scholar or an entrepreneur. There's no way I could work for a larger company. I'm just not built that way. But that was my way of getting the best of both worlds. So all I've ever done for the last 20 years is work with entrepreneurs, but I've also been building an academic career at the same time. And I have a couple of different sidecar projects where I can dabble in the world of entrepreneurship, which maybe we can talk about if you'd like. But I try not to go too far with that because it would make me less of a scholar,
Mhm.
less of a teacher, and then I would be cheating the students that come to our program that we teach. So I kind of grew organically into this role. The passion for scholarship is what drove me, but to be able to apply concepts and frameworks to the entrepreneurs that are right here in our local ecosystem is what energizes me. And that's
Mhm.
what I spend all of my time doing.
So now you would have a better insight to this, but it doesn't seem like now I kind of feel like entrepreneurship is a little bit of the sexy thing, like, ooh, bright, shiny lights. It's just talked about a lot more. But when you started in your academic career or, being going into professorship, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, even getting your PhD, was it the same, this what am I trying to say? Was there that kind of attraction for people to entrepreneurship, or were you kind of doing something outside of the box?
It was not so popular at that time. There's still only, there's only 4 universities with undergraduate majors in the state of Alabama right now, and there's only about 300 in the country. And there are 60 colleges or universities in the state, and there's about 5,300 or so colleges or universities in the country. So we're talking about like 4 or 5% now. But back
Yeah.
then, this is 20 years ago, it was even less on the radar. We didn't
Hmm.
have our big co-working spaces in the city of Chicago, like 1871, which is our flagship, didn't emerge until around 2007 or so.
Hmm.
And to be quite frank, if it were popular, I wouldn't have done it. I've never liked popular things. In fact, they make me They make me doubt them. I'm not interested. If everybody's doing it and if everybody's talking about it, I am not. I'm just at the level of my DNA. I don't go that way. I know where that wide road leads, and I'm not interested. I prefer to go my own way, my own independent path, and find out, hopefully, if I'm lucky, something nobody's ever found before. And so I did stumble upon it quite literally because, like I said, I was so interested in the epistemology of Karl Popper,
Mhm.
and then applying that to the business world, because I was in a business school doing a PhD. That was what drove my dissertation, and that was what inspired me. And it wasn't much more than that. It was just something that was interesting to me. And then again, combined with the faith that it'll all take me to the place where I should be and where I belong, that drove me. But no, it wasn't popular back then at all.
So then when you went to your first, when you got your first teaching job and then tried to start applying these principles, did you, I mean, was the faculty and your team, deans, were they on board with you bringing this in, or how did that go?
Well, it's one of the great privileges of being in academia. You can do almost anything you want if you're able to do it in a way that they can't really deny its validity,
Uh-huh.
its educational quality. If you're properly trained as a PhD, you can take anything and teach it because you'll know how to ground it in concepts and things that will carry a class for 15 weeks, and people in the class will listen to it, see its value. Your peers and your colleagues will evaluate it, and they'll look for a theoretic framework and a conceptual approach and all of that, and they will accept it. And so that's what I did. I've always taken my scholarship very seriously. And so that's what I did. So early on, people be talking about, well, what do you mean? What is a framework for conjectures and refutations? And I would say, well, the power of deductive thinking. And one might say, well, that sounds pretty academic. What are you talking about? And I would say,
Yeah.
well, imagine if you have a theory that, I'll just use a famous one that's been used in Karl Popper's philosophy. Imagine you have a theory that all swans are white, and you may want to go out and prove that theory. Well, the first thing I would tell you is you can't ever prove a theory. It doesn't work that way. The highest status a theory, which by the way includes your entrepreneurial notions of the future, they have the characteristics of a theory. The highest status that it can hold is not yet refuted, because you may go out and observe white swans for 30 years, but you cannot tell me with certainty that you will not see a non-white one tomorrow. And if you do, that one instance will refute all of your data collection. So that's the inductive approach and the poverty of the inductive approach. A deductive approach is to have the theory that not all swans are white. That gives you a logical framework for having an exit strategy in the entrepreneurial world. And it gives you a logical framework to grow your knowledge in the scientific world. That's why we say things like you fail to reject the null hypothesis, or you reject the null hypothesis. That came from Karl Popper. And so I'm getting into my dissertation right now, but if you really teach people how to think intelligently,
Mhm.
they can avoid all of these human weaknesses, because people are attracted to what's popular. They're attracted to inductive thinking. They go after and chase what's right, and they think it's ideal and it'll last forever. But guess what? The real world doesn't act that way. And so my role is, having learned all of that over the years and having taught many people that in many different places, I need to do that at UAB, because a lot of these young people want to be entrepreneurs. And if they have the right mindset going in, we can help them succeed.
Mhm.
That also applies to the local ecosystem, because we're doing outreach projects where we instill these kinds of principles into the way that these entrepreneurs that we're working with think. And so in this way, I'm excited because we're going to have impact on the ecosystem, but it's a university. It's rooted in our academic product, but we're applying it to the local community around us, thinking
Yeah.
globally, acting locally.
Yeah. Well, so I know that you did this in Chicago. How long were you in Chicago? A long time.
June of 2000 until mid 2018, a good solid 18 years I lived there.
So then from Chicago, you didn't come directly to Birmingham. Were you in the UK? Is that correct?
No, I edit. You must have seen that on my LinkedIn.
I
I edited
did.
a journal.
Yes.
I edited a journal
Okay.
that,
Because I was
so
like, that's a piece of information that was new to me. Because I thought you came here directly from Chicago.
I did. Yeah, I became
Okay.
director for the
Okay.
city of Chicago. No, I edited a big journal, and the publisher is based in the UK, and so that is on my LinkedIn. But I did. Yeah, mid
Okay.
2018, my wife and I moved here.
So I want to know this career that you loved and city that you loved. How did Birmingham draw you away from Chicago?
We all grow, right, as people, and we're all exposed to things over time. And there are a few things that you want to commit your life to forever. Husband or a wife is one, family members maybe. There aren't many things outside of those sorts of presences in our life that we commit to. So in the city of Chicago, as I say, I was there 18 years and I lived and worked downtown. So I didn't have a car for, I think, 17 of those 18 years, walking to work, living and working downtown. But everything you can do in the city of Chicago, we did it.
Yeah.
I mean, we frequently would be at cafes or clubs. I knew the ones to go to. I knew when to go. I'd be sitting next to Vince Neil and Tommy Lee. People just like living that life where you're exposed to exciting things all around you all the time is cool for a while. Okay. It's cool for a while. In your 30s, it's really cool. But when you start hitting like 40 and 40, you just change, you grow. And I didn't want to be the aging hipster, like sitting there at the end of the, in the cafe, like looking cool and all that. I started to think about other types of things to get value out of my lived experience. And
Mhm.
when this opportunity emerged, again, there's nothing you can do in Chicago that I feel like I didn't do that I would want to do. And so this opportunity emerged, and Birmingham looked very attractive to me. There was no prejudgment for me. I've never had prejudgments about things in my life. And if I do, I consciously try to, that actually will attract me to something more. But it was like Alabama, big question mark. I bet it's a hidden gem. I bet this is an amazing place. So we visited 4 times because it's not just me, it's my wife, right?
Yeah.
And the job was the other half of it, of course. I mean, I made full professor in 2013 at DePaul
Oh.
University. I was the youngest full professor at DePaul, and I was not yet an endowed chair. In
Mhm.
my field, when you make endowed chair, that's it. That's the pinnacle. You're almost like, it's almost like getting a big deal with a VC firm. If you're an entrepreneurial venture, you're sponsored, you're supported, you have something
Yeah.
because your work has earned that for you. And I was on track. We had an endowed chair at my previous university, and my mentor occupied it, and he wasn't ready to retire. I didn't want him to retire. He's a good friend of mine, but this one emerged, and I got the blessing of people close to me, and like, that would be a great move for you. You should consider it. And so we did. And so the job, the location, the city, the people, everything just lined up. And so, like most things in my life, I didn't have to think about it. If I have to think about it, I usually don't do it.
Mhm.
But it naturally and organically emerged into my life as a gift, like many things do, I think.
Well, and as a side note, I know how long did y'all live in Birmingham without a car? You brought your Chicago lifestyle with you for a little while.
10 months.
10 months.
See, I had a Vespa scooter in Chicago that I rode around, and I got one here, but we used Lyft and Uber for literally the first 10 months we lived here.
I think that's pretty incredible. And you live downtown, which helps, but still,
Right.
that's when you moved here, there probably wasn't the Publix wasn't open yet. Was it?
I'm not sure. I don't remember it not being open, but I
Okay.
think it did open up right around the time we moved down here. But yeah, that was great. Great grocery store, great downtown area. I can kind of predict where that's headed too, by the way, because I've seen neighborhoods in the city of Chicago that are as big as Birmingham 20 years ago and watched them evolve. And
Uh-huh.
with the energy that's coming and focusing and the things that are emerging, I have a reasonable forecast, I think, of what Birmingham is going to evolve into based on what's here right now and based on my past experience.
Well, can you give us a little snippet?
Sure. I think it's becoming one of the first things I said. I was in a meeting at the BBA, and Ray Watts was there, and a couple of other people from the ecosystem in the city were there. And we were talking about the development of the city. And I said, I believe we need to make it really easy for a lot of young people to move downtown,
Yeah.
period. And it's happening. There's a lot
Mhm.
of residential developments and apartments and so forth going up closer into the city. As you do that, it will have a strong effect on the entrepreneurial ecosystem. Like right now, folks are talking about like, how do we meet entrepreneurs? How do we connect with them? When the young people come in, that's going to drive the emergence of more cafes and restaurants and businesses. And
Mhm.
that will become a hotbed, and it will add to the places where social connections can be made. I think that's going to take about 5 years to really get up to a point where we become a destination downtown. Of course, you can see it trending in that direction, right? Like Railroad
Right.
Park, that was a big step forward. There's going to be more and more of that type of stuff. And as it happens, you'll see the proportion of entrepreneurial ventures go up. The
Yeah.
rate of emergence of them will go up. There will be more and more co-working spaces. Chicago probably has 40 or more big co-working spaces. And by big, I mean 25 of them are the size of Innovation Depot, let's say.
Right.
But back in
Yeah.
2005, 2006, there was maybe three,
Yeah.
and they weren't the sexy kind. They were sort of like small business center for a particular industry. And just watching that grow, I can see what's happening here. I can see the role of our program in the university and how it makes
Mhm.
impact on that. And I also understand what the university, UAB, is going to be able to do.
So you've touched on this slightly, but I would love to hear you talk about it a little bit more. I know that it's a really big deal that you were able to start this entrepreneurship major at UAB. So can you just tell us, the listeners, like why that is such a big deal to have that program at the university?
Uh, a couple of reasons, and I'm glad you're giving me a chance to answer this question. Um, University education is something that almost everybody strives for. It's not something, contrary to perhaps popular belief, that most people have. In fact, the vast minority of people in this country get a university education. And so the focus on the importance of a university education is there, and it's very, very solid. And if it's going to be something that we are working to open up and increase the access to for more populations, which we are, more and more people are going to be coming this way. So once they're there, once you're in the university system anywhere, it is the programs, and more specifically the credit hours attributable to programs, that are the currency. They are the coins of the realm. Credit hours and credit hour generation is how a university evaluates itself. And so that boils down to the majors that are in each particular school that make up a university. So in our Collat School of Business, we have, let's say, 9 majors, right? We have like marketing, industrial distribution, management, economics, finance, accounting. Entrepreneurship is one of them, on par with all those other majors. So without being set in the structure of the operational structure, I mean, of the university, which generates the credit hours, entrepreneurship is almost like an ancillary, auxiliary side project, and you kind of have to do it outside the core operations of the university. But with the major, that embeds entrepreneurship right into the core of what the university does. And once you're there, then you start dealing in the coins of the realm, which are credit hours, students and classes. You grow that bank account. I use the term
Mhm.
loosely, bank account of credit hours. Students will show up. You can hire more people. I can hire more faculty. That means I can scale up and do more outreach projects, which will benefit the community, because we are building an outreach-based program. Without a major, you can't really do that. And if you combine it with the fact that we're really the only big major public university with this kind of program. There are some great universities here in Alabama that have entrepreneurship majors: Samford,
Mhm.
Auburn, Montgomery, Alabama A&M, and
Mhm.
UAB. It's not
Mhm.
something that traditional universities are able to do yet, because the process for getting something like that approved, a lot of people on the outside don't understand. You think about universities as being bureaucratic and slow moving. You have no idea. It's you have to build political momentum. You have to meet a bunch of deadlines. You have to pitch and convince audiences of people who may vote for, or they may vote against what you want to do. and it's secret ballot, and they can tell you they voted for it when actually they voted against it or whatever they want, or not tell you anything. So it's really, and there's about 15 key junctures where your program can be knocked off at any point when you're building it up. So we were able to get it through that in the Alabama system. It goes all the way up to the Board of Trustees.
Mm-hmm.
And it, you know, I had the support of the president of UAB, Ray Watts, the provost, the dean, everybody just really supported this. So that helped a lot. But at the end of the day, the faculty have to buy it. So we were able to do that here. It's a significant achievement,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also significant in terms of its potential, because now we can take entrepreneurship from a sort of a cute side project at a university to make
Mm-hmm.
it a real legitimate area of study that is on par with finance and economics and marketing and everything else.
So when you say you're an outreach program, tell me what you mean by that.
There are levels of outreach that a lot of business schools try to build into their business education activities. Mm-hmm. Urban universities like UAB and like where I was previously tend to do this a lot better because mm-hmm. the nature of their environment, they're just locked into a physical and geographic local ecosystem that exposes them to a lot of companies in a very close way. We have that advantage here, but we're in terms of the level of outreach, we're pushing it to a very high level. In fact, I would call our program progressive. It might be the most progressive entrepreneurship education program that I'm aware of in my field. It's more than guest speakers. It's more than field trips. It is, instead of those things, which we do, but one of the things we also do is we make the classes feel like a project that just happens to be a class, meaning that students are put into teams right up front, and then they are paired with local entrepreneurial ventures that have real problems with real dollars and real deadlines, and they need real help to work through them. So if I can teach, or my colleagues can teach groups of students powerful concepts that enable them to thrive in conditions of uncertainty or struggle and strife, or how to treat tragedy as an opportunity. I mean, what better way for them to learn more about those lessons by working with an entrepreneur who's actually dealing with that? So through the guidance of the instructor, we have the teams go through these outreach projects, which are a lot like consulting projects, but they apply the material they're learning to the entrepreneurial venture that they're working with. And then at the end of it, this is a key part, we have the outreach partners or the entrepreneurs write a memo, a formal memo to the instructor of record, whether it's me or one of my colleagues, concretely articulating the value that those students' work added to their business. Mm. And then we save those. I have hundreds of these from over the course of my career, because I've been doing this a long time. We have about 10 of them now at UAB since I've been here, since we launched the program. But that's how we measure impact. Yeah. I mean, when a donor or somebody wants to know, what are you doing for the ecosystem? Well, here you go. Boom, yeah. Boom, boom. Look what these entrepreneurs are saying that this work added to their business. And then we even take it farther. We allow the outreach partners or the entrepreneurs to participate in evaluating the work of the students. So we use those memos and feedback from the entrepreneurs.
Something. That's what happens when you're downtown.
I know, right? It's one of the, we're going to hear some sirens here in a minute. It's UAB after all. But we use the entrepreneurial input and feedback to evaluate the student work and to grade the students. So the student's grade not only comes from their performance in the class, but their performance with the client. And the reason we do that is it gears what we're teaching for relevance. Because if it is valuable to that entrepreneur right now, then that's a lesson that is demonstrably relevant to what entrepreneurship is right now.
So that, I had one question, but that brings up another question. My like type A, want to make A student just jumped out. But my first question is, how have businesses responded to this? Like, have they been receptive to bringing in students to help on projects, especially startups, or, you know, how are they receptive to students helping on big, like meaningful projects?
I don't even have to sell it. I have a waiting list of local ventures teed up and ready to work with our teams, because word spreads and they find out that we're doing this. Essentially, it's like pro bono consulting, right?
Yeah.
And every entrepreneur I know has some sort of challenge right now that they're dealing with, because it's a barrier to their growth. They're all trying to grow, and there's
Right.
something in the way, like more knowledge about the market, more connections with potential customers, a better pitch deck, a better operational structure. They need to hire more staff. I mean, there's all these things they need to
Hmm.
do to support their growth. And they hear about what we're doing, and then I have a Google Drive document. Actually, I've kept it for years. I just kept using the same one when I moved here, but I'll add them to the list. And then when we're
Yeah.
ready, we'll reach out to you and do a project with you.
So my other question is that what you described the students' projects are and classes is I would think is very different from what they're used to in their other academic classes where you can just study hard and make a good grade. So I'm sure there's some shift in the training with the students of, this is not just a grade. This is somebody's actual business.
Right. There's a shift in the training. It's the kind of academic experience that I've told my colleagues this from the day I arrived here, and they're seeing it now. But we don't attract traditionally really good students, like A students,
Hmm.
entrepreneurship students who are really truly genuinely interested in making that their life's calling, tend to be what we might call C students,
Hmm.
because they don't necessarily want to be told what's right and then do it. I
Yeah.
was in an early meeting here, and one of my colleagues was talking about in his classes, he can tell the students that the sky is green, and they would write it down. And I said, man, that it's a great point you make, because I'm showing you guys how entrepreneurship is a little bit different. For me, I could tell my students in entrepreneurship that the sky is blue, and they would argue with me. And
Yeah.
they would say, ain't you ever heard of nighttime? Or they would say, what about on a cloudy day? Or, I could tell them the sky is blue, and they'd argue with me. So it is different. It's a different type of student. And so our first alum, just to use a really specific example, he dropped out of UAB 5 years
Mhm.
ago because he wasn't getting what he wanted in his education. And when he heard about this and he had launched 6 businesses while he's out there.
Oh.
He's starting an angel fund right now locally here in Birmingham, which I think is a big opportunity for the ecosystem. We don't have enough angel funds here. A lot of
Mhm.
angel investors, not enough angel funds, but we're gonna change that. So he came back to complete the program, and then we have students from across UAB. About 50% of the 50 that you mentioned earlier, about half of them come from outside the business school because they
Mhm.
want to be entrepreneurs, but they're not getting what they believe they need from the traditional functions of businesses. They're reflected in the majors that exist. But when entrepreneurship emerges, they become attracted to it. So it is a different educational experience, but it also is geared perhaps somewhat naturally and organically to a different type of student.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, I'm the type of person to be like, okay, green, got it. But then I had to shift somewhere, I guess, if I started a business.
Right. And to be fair, the entrepreneurs, they can't just hire others who are like them. They need to hire folks who will write down the sky is green if they're told the sky is green. It's that diversity and approach that's important.
I know I work with a local high school that they have an incubator program and then have done some with the students at UAB. And I just always tell them, like, guys, what you're doing right now. And at the time when I was working with the students at UAB, it was extra, it wasn't their major. And at the high school, it feels it's very different from all their other classes. And I'm like, I know this feels really hard and very different. And it's a lot of extra work, but this is the best thing you can do. I mean, even if you don't go to start your own business, you're going to be a better employee. You're going to understand so much. Like, it's just such great training to go through the process of starting a business.
It's probably the
um,
future of business education. I
mhm.
believe it's been growing for about a good 2 decades now, but things in academia change slowly. And it has entrepreneurship has been steadily growing, and it is affecting the high schools and how they serve their students. So I think UAB is on the cutting edge of something that is a larger movement, and we're very well positioned to be a leader in that movement.
So I know that you are also very passionate about the career path of academia. So what role do you see that academia has, and you've touched on this some, in the growth of entrepreneurship, and not just in our city, but in our country and also worldwide?
Teaching is its own competence. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you can teach it. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, if you're an expert at something, like really truly good at a particular thing, it makes you worse as a teacher. I mean, if you've ever heard, like, there's a lot of examples, but like, take Mark Knopfler, Dire Straits. That's a great guitar player. He's really great. I'm sort of an amateur musician, so I watch a lot of this stuff. There's a video I found where he's explaining how he plays and writes songs. And if you listen to him explain it, it makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. Great musicians like him have a business manager, or he had a music instructor, I would guess, or an influence or a mentor along the way. Great actors have acting coaches, great artists have art teachers, and none of the teachers are necessarily better than the students. They're just teachers, they teach. And so, like I say, it's its own competency. Just because you can do it doesn't mean you can teach it. You have to actually understand. If you're really going to be in higher education, you have to understand true philosophy, like
Mm-hmm.
true ways to frame the problem, ways to work with data, ways to work with statistics, how to parse true score variance from error variance. It's something that you just have to be content to deal with and teach to others and not do it. Like I said earlier, I don't want to be a full-time entrepreneur. It would make me
Mm-hmm.
less of a scholar or an academic. So to the degree that entrepreneurship can have a place in the modern university, which with growing numbers of entrepreneurship majors, it can, then people who are trained to be scholars, not to be entrepreneurs, but really how to be the art teacher to the artist, or the music
Mm-hmm.
teacher to the musician, or the one who helps make connections and just gives the students questions or frameworks that help them believe in their own future at a critical point in their lives. We have that role to
Yeah.
play. We can play that role very well. And I'm, like I say, I'm excited about the future of my field, but I'm excited about what it means for Birmingham.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that leads me into my next question. So the title of this podcast is Building Birmingham Together. Um, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. Just we're not just all individual things doing our own, you know, isolated thing. We're all impacting the city, and we can either be intentional or not intentional about it. But so, and I know you feel passionate about that as well in the positive direction, but where do you see our areas of growth for businesses to really buy into this idea that we are all building Birmingham together?
I think it starts with the culture,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a couple of different ways to look at that. One way is the magic city, the history of the term, and those of us who live here know where that came from and what it means. But it's something that needs to be, you know, dive down deeper into what enabled the city to reemerge after steel went away, and then you have legal and you have all these other industries, but the city can reinvent itself. Essentially, it's magic. It transforms. Not all cities are like that, and we
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't take that for granted. I mean, I don't know, Flint, Michigan, maybe. That's one who has studied the history of Flint, Michigan, and what happened after GM leaves and different things happen. This ability to transform and reinvent is not something all cities have. So we need to double down on culture. I can tell you, culture will destroy strategy any day of the week. And if you understand culture, that means you can feel the values that define a place. And if you can
Uh-huh.
feel those values that are shared amongst the people living there, they have the character of expectations about the future. Culture beats strategy because culture is what enables us to deal with uncertainty. Uncertainty is
Mm-hmm.
when you have no idea what might happen next. Risk is when you do have an idea of what might happen next, and you can strategize in relation to it because you know the range of outcomes. You just don't know which outcome is going to emerge, but there's almost like a probability distribution. Strategy is good for that, but entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ecosystems, they're more on the uncertainty side of things, and that means
Mm-hmm.
you have to double down on culture. And so for Birmingham, I think feeling the culture and its history going into the past, including civil rights, including the reinvention of the city multiple times over, is very much part of how we have to define ourselves and feel that. By the way, there may be some people listening who know this, but I bet there's a lot who don't.
Oh.
For one like me who came here, the first thing I did when I saw the guy with the popsicle on the mountain up there, actually, you can kind of, I don't know if you can see him.
Let's see. I
It's
think
too
he's
small.
kind of whited out. Yeah, with the
Yeah,
with the
it's
beautiful sunshine.
right back there. That's important. So Vulcan is a Roman god, Romanized version of a Greek god, Hephaestus. Hephaestus was, out of all the gods, and I mean like any Greek god you can name or think of, he was the most entrepreneurial one. I mean, he's the only god who sweats. He invented an automatic bellows for ironworking. He created an automatic gate in the heavens so that the gods on their chariots could hit a button, and I don't know if they hit a button, but it would open up automatically. He fabricated a fleet of self-driving delivery carts to cater the gods' banquets with nectar. He invented a crew of golden androids who had intelligence. He created a flying drone to torture Prometheus. He made a lot of like devices that improved the nature of work. He created Pandora. You've heard the story of Pandora, Pandora's box. Pandora was actually an android. It wasn't a real person according to the mythology. And he essentially showed that these technologies that are of the gods and for the gods, all these amazing inventions, when put into the wrong hands, which were usually human hands, they were used for evil.
Mm.
And, you know, that's a very important lesson for entrepreneurs, by the way. You do anything that's big or great or impactful or disruptive, there's going to be unintended consequences that aren't always good. And so you have to be extremely humble. And there's a profound sense of humility that one has to have if you're going to build something that changes the world. Because when you do something that's great, your error is also going to be great. And so one of the first things I did was I read everything that I could find about Vulcan and Hephaestus. You know, hundreds of years of knowledge are embedded in that. And people lived their lives for centuries based on the stories around that particular figure, who, by the way, he also built a killer robot to defend, named Talos, to defend an island. I mean, he was truly the entrepreneur of the gods. It is not an exaggeration to say that. And so if that is our symbol of our culture,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't care if you know it or don't know it, just being exposed to that culturally at the level of our values, it has an effect on the Magic City. It has an effect on the culture of entrepreneurship and our approach to things. And so I think the way forward for Birmingham is cultural.
Mm-hmm.
I think the civil rights, the history of civil rights here gives us amazing knowledge, like the letter from Birmingham jail, which I hope everyone listening has read multiple times. I put that work on par with the Apology of Socrates before his judges, the Apologia, as it's known, as a work of philosophy and knowledge and wisdom. You know, you're talking about someone who's trying to lead a movement and convince others to support him with what he's doing. It's going to feel very familiar to what entrepreneurs who really believe in what they're doing and want to make change, a lot of the things they deal with. And so there's a lot of beautiful cultural things here and historical things that we all need to celebrate, learn about, and share knowledge in relation to those things, because they're a strategic weapon for us at the end of the day.
Yeah. Okay, so this is my final question for you that I like to ask everybody on the podcast or who it comes on here is, I would just love to know, I know you've been, done a lot of different things and worked with a lot of different people. So some of the a lesson that you have learned along the way, just about that impacts the way that you live your life today. And it doesn't have to be business related, but just something that impacts the decisions that you make day to day.
Sure. A couple of different things. Two things come to mind. One is that If you're too big to do the small things, then you're too small to do the big things. One of the first things I do when I meet folks is, if they're not showing up at the events at night when it's not convenient to be there, if they're not rolling up their sleeves to do the work, there's probably a little bit of vanity in there, which is cool. That has its place. But if you're too big to do those small things, you're too small, in my view, to do the big things. And that's something that matters a lot to me. And I don't know where or how that was taught to me, but that's been a big thing for me all along. Probably my mom or somebody.
Yeah.
Another one is, if you do a good thing on purpose, it doesn't deserve any reward, period. Doing a good act, doing something that's great, you don't get any, you shouldn't deserve any, you don't get any reward for that. It's a reward is a different sort of thing when it's a little bit more unexpected and you made something happen, but you didn't really, it's the way a culture celebrates something. It's not the way an individual glorifies themselves. So if you do a good act, it doesn't deserve a reward. But at the same time, if somebody does an evil act by accident, it doesn't deserve any punishment. So let me just reframe this because it's sort of balanced. Good done on purpose deserves no reward. Bad done by accident deserves no punishment. And I have put this logic into pretty much everything I've done since I've been building my career. And if you do that, it drives a certain kind of humility. Glory seeking kind of goes away, but also you don't blame people for mistakes in quite the same way if you build this paradigm into the way that you view things. If somebody does something bad, but it's purely unintentional, there should be no punishment there. And so that is those are watchwords for me. Both of those things I just shared with you, and we teach those, but I've been living by those myself for a long time. And I think pretty much everything that I've done, it's a blessing. You hear people talk about like success is luck and like it's not really me, it's other people. People are saying this all the time. It's not really vanity. It is. I mean, if you just do your best day in and day out, live for today and then let it go, and don't get stressed about what the future may or may not hold for you. That's a matter of faith, because you can't know what's going to happen anyway. But I can know what I'm working with right now, and I can make it the best I can possibly make it, whether it's a book or an article, or I'm doing a deal, or I'm doing a podcast, or I'm teaching a class, or I'm about to publish something. I'm going to make it the best I can right now. And who knows where it might go someplace beyond my wildest dreams. But living life that way day to day is good, and it will lead you to where you eventually ought to be.
Well, those are some good, wise words. Thank you for sharing them with us. And I'm so glad that you got to come here and share what you're doing at UAB, your passion, because your passion just comes out in everything you do. And it makes others excited about the work and excited about being in entrepreneurship and making it through the really hard days. The really hard times. It's just a reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. But I do have a quick few questions that I didn't warn you about. So they're easy. You won't have a hard time with them. So one I love to ask, because I love to hear what other people are doing. What is your top one or two business related books that you recommend for people to read?
This is a very challenging question for me because I do not like popular press books.
Oh, okay.
And I can answer this, but well, think about it. Most of them, after 5 years, if you pick them up again, if they're not well grounded and really, that's why I like research in journals, because it stays relevant for 20 or 30 years, but they're very hard to write. I mean, try to write a book for Yale University Press or for one of these journals. It's very hard to make something so unimpeachable that they'll actually publish it. And then, you never hear about it, but if you read it, you're like, man, these are a little more timeless. So that's a criterion for me when I look at these books, but I can name a couple for you. They're going to be a little more obscure. I'm going to guess. One of them is called Mismanagement of Markets by Benoit Mandelbrot. He was a Sterling professor at Yale and French. You've heard of fractals, perhaps, fractal distributions. He was one of the architects of the fractal distribution, which was a challenge to really the capital asset pricing model and a lot of what we'll call Gaussian distribution driven approaches to dealing with data and financial data. Brilliant guy, able to break things down in a simple way. And he wrote a book, and Mismanagement of Markets, one of the smartest business books that I've ever read. And then here's another one. This is going way back. Okay, these are going to be a little bit obscure, but I think any entrepreneur ought to read this book. It's called, I'm probably going to get the title wrong. It's written by a guy named Kevin Kelly, who is active in the Long Now Foundation out of San Francisco. The book is called something, it's sort of an unfortunately trendy sounding title, something about 10 rules for the new economy, something like that. But the way he writes about opportunities instead of efficiency, and this sort of the place of innovation and how business works, it's so good that it's timeless. Even though it's a trendy .com era sort of thing, you can read it right now and you'll get a lot of good knowledge out of that. So those two books come to mind right off the top of my head. They're the only popular press books I would recommend.
Okay. So you've been in Birmingham 4 years now, going on your fourth?
Just about 3 years, not quite 3 years, almost
not
3
quite
years.
2018. Okay. I can't do math and think at the same time, even though I was a math major. Little known fact. So what is, food is really big here. What's y'all's favorite go-to places in Birmingham for food?
Da Vinci's Pizza right over the mountain in downtown Homewood.
Okay.
Da Vinci spelled with a E, D-E. I'm told they used to have a lot of locations. Now I think they only have one, and it's legit good. And by the way, I lived in Chicago for a long time.
Chicago. Yeah. That's a big compliment.
And I can tell you, like, the best pizza places that are off the beaten path up there too, but Da Vinci's I would put on par with any of them.
Oh,
It's
wow.
a phenomenal pie. It's a great pizza that Da Vinci's makes. We also were big fans of Sam and Bernie and Bamboo down there on 2nd Avenue North. So my wife and I, before the pandemic, for sure, we were going in there multiple times a week. They even named a roll after, they called it Professor Maki. It's my own custom sort of concoction, and I'm sure you can still go there and order it by name. So we're big fans of Bamboo. And then there's a Thai restaurant in a gas station that I don't even know what it's called, but it's way down south. I've been there. Okay. That is I can't remember the name.
Oh, I can't remember the name of it.
We'll have to look it up.
Lorna Road, right?
I think so. Yeah, you can post it in the comments or something like that to let people know.
Notes. That's right. That's right.
Legit Thai food from that place right there. And then what's the Asian grocery store down there? They have
the Red Pearl.
Yeah, not the Red Pearl, but the other Chinese restaurant that is, they have 2 locations, and one of them is in a strip mall, and then one of them is actually in the Asian grocery store down there. It's not Red Pearl. It's called, oh gosh, we're gonna have to put it in the comments. I'm bad at remembering names of places, but okay, so if it helps to anybody who's listening, the Chinese restaurant that's in the big Asian supermarket, not that location, but the second location of that same restaurant is great. And the reason it's great, we didn't talk about this, but I was a foreign student in China. I've lived and worked in China and the Middle East, and I speak Chinese. And so I know Chinese food very well. And when I go to a Chinese restaurant, I practice my Chinese and I talk with them about what they have. Their chef is from Sichuan province at that particular restaurant in the strip mall that I'm talking about. And
is it the strip mall at the Colonnade?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's the second location of the restaurant that's in the Asian supermarket down there. And it's not Red Pearl. It's there's probably people listening like screaming the answer like, my gosh, everybody knows that. But the chef is from Sichuan province, which is the heart of Chinese cuisine in China, famous province for food. And they have mapo tofu and yuxiang qiezi, and they have fantastic jiaozi, and they have great vegetables, bo cai with daswan, and it's just a great Chinese restaurant. So
Okay.
the Thai restaurant and a gas station, the Chinese restaurant, I can't remember the name, Bamboo, and Da Vinci's Pizza would be my recommendations for restaurants.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you for the work that you're doing. I know the students just love being in your classes, the work that you're doing for them, the city. We're just so appreciative. And thank you for being on Building Birmingham Together today.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
All right.